Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's mid-month meeting of the minds. Guess who I have here today? This is Marcia, and she is an extremely talented woman, originally from the Netherlands, now living in New Orleans. So we're going to talk a little bit about global to regional. But Marcia and I run into each other at numerous networking events. And I hope she remembers which ones they are because there are many. And it's always a surprise because I'm a physician and she's not. I believe she's an engineer, but I'm going to let her tell you more about herself. Go for it, Marcia.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to meet with you online. Normally, we see each other in person, indeed, at many very different oriented networking meetings, if my memory serves me right. So, yes, I'm a Dutch engineer. I grew up in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, to be precise, which is why New Orleans makes some sense to me. Um, and then did a couple of decades around working around the globe in oil and gas, largely frontier projects. So I've seen all the continents and worked on most of them. I've been in places like Eastern Russia and Iraq and Africa, but also many lovely Asian islands, etc. Um, and then I left that career behind 7, 8 years ago, and just started an LLC so I could pick up some random work. And I had a very random collection of work for a few years. We continued to move. I worked in the COVID response for 2 years. I did a bunch of disaster action management with FEMA and the Red Cross. But I also worked with a lot of startups, did consulting, did coaching, and then settled back in New Orleans 3 years ago. I have some teenagers that need to go through high school, and so I want to give them a chance to do that in one place. And so I've pivoted my business with more specificity. So my business is called the Chaos Games Consulting, and I have a podcast with it, which is called the Business Emergency Room. And that's really what I do, triage for businesses. I have a lot of experience working with anything from startups to multinationals and in between. And it turns out I'm really good at when things get complex and messy. And when we've reached a point, what now, now what? So that's where I sit.
I love it. Let's back up a little bit and break it down piece by piece. Do you remember what first brought you to New Orleans? Did you come from Amsterdam or somewhere else? Because you
Well,
said you've worked in oil and gas, which is
yes.
obviously a natural fit for New Orleans, but let's just back up a
Yeah.
tiny bit.
Yeah. So the first time I was actually supposed to be in New Orleans was the week Katrina hit.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I was still working in oil and gas, and I just inherited a team that was half based here in New Orleans and half based in Europe. And their team lead, for medical reasons, had left the stage quite tragically. And so I was assigned interim lead for that team, and I was supposed to be here the week of Katrina to meet the New Orleans-based crew. So yeah, that was my first exposure. After that, I worked a stint in Houston and was here in that period regularly, then left the US again. And then ultimately, my very last role in oil and gas was in New Orleans. I did it for a year in New Orleans and loved New Orleans, but didn't love the job. And so didn't love the industry anymore and exited then. And so we left New Orleans, but we came back.
I love it. And then so somewhere along the way you've pivoted from the oil and gas industry as an engineer. You've pivoted and now you actually rescue businesses when they're in a messy situation. And the networking events that you and I have met at have included the Women's Networking Alliance for the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Tulane Innovation Institute, their networking event. And I'm not sure where. Oh, and we've also met for the women in IT, that group,
Yeah.
at their
I think
first
it's
event.
officially called Women in Tech.
Yes, yes.
And in my world, women in tech typically also includes engineers. The women in tech in New Orleans indeed seems to circle more around IT.
But so let's talk a little bit more about your podcast series. I mean, this is a podcast for Plans Connect, meaning we're having a meeting of the minds and talking about the power of networking. But I want you to learn more about the Business ER podcast. So tell me a little bit more about that, maybe how it started. I understand you're great at fixing complex solutions, but how did you come up with this podcast idea?
Yeah. So I'm an engineer. I love what I do. I also think I'm very good at what I do. I really don't love sales and business development. I think culturally, as a Dutch person, it's also really, there is a disconnect by in presenting yourself and in the language that is used between Americans and Dutch people. So
Okay.
to a Dutch person, American language is high amplitude, as we call it. So there is a lot of superlatives in it. Everything's fantastic and amazing. And to us, that makes it less believable. We're also the very Calvinist nature of Dutch culture is that you don't really stick your head out from the cornfield, right? You don't talk about yourself as if you're more special than somebody else. But the nature of your own business or promoting yourself, if you are your business, is of course at odds with that. So I struggled with that very much. And I struggled also a little bit with the fact that my business had come from referral. I was now, but it was everywhere in the world, not necessarily around New Orleans. So how do I make it clear that I exist, that I can do this? The challenge suddenly is that people who maybe advertise that they do what I do or who get pulled in to do the work I do are typically 2 decades older than I am, white and male, and have facial hair of a different color than mine, right? Typically they're silver haired and distinguished looking. And so for me, the podcast killed a few birds with one stone, as in it allows me to talk content about what I do and provide that value directly to my audience without them buying anything from me, right? So I'm in my comfort zone sharing what I do best. I'm showcasing my capabilities, and I like the talking part. I like talking with people. I always wanted to be a radio DJ. And so this was a channel that felt actually authentic to me to put myself out there. Um, and
I love it.
I didn't think I
I
would
love
enjoy
it.
it as much as I did, but now out of all the things I do, this is one that I really, it's never a hardship. I never mind doing any work on it. I never dread doing anything around it. It's been pure joy, really.
Everything you said truly resonated with me personally because I don't even remember why I launched the podcast series, but I did feel it was a way to showcase all the amazing and interesting and varied connections I have. Yes, I'm a physician, but I have connections to so many aspects of science, healthcare, technology, research, pharmaceutical industry, public health. And how can I demonstrate that I know these connections without, like you said, bragging about myself? And really bragging about it doesn't do any good. You really have to actually demonstrate the proof. So the fact that you and I have been connecting socially for the past, I think, 2 years now, or close to it, and then we said we're going to have a longer meeting, and I think we actually met for lunch one day. Yes, we did. And so then we needed to put it together and highlight what we can do. So I want to go a little deeper into what you do with the excuse me. Is it the chaos games, or which part of your business do you go in and fix messed up businesses? I want to hear a little bit about that, like 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, so my business is called the Chaos Games Consulting. I've always, those of us who've worked in big corporate, right? If you do any type of leadership training, they always talk about what's your superpower, what differentiates you, whatever. And so I would say that even if you look at my early individual development plans, as they were called with us internally, if you look at the really early ones, something around structure and chaos has always been in there. And so that was a logical name for me to call my business. I think business is a game also. I always talk because I get asked so much about, or I used to get asked so much, right, about being a female. And as young as I was in the industry I was in, I was an outlier frequently and stuff. And ultimately, it comes, yeah, yes, you can be authentic, you can be different, you can all sorts of things, but ultimately you need to know how the game of business or the game of life is played. And you
True.
can choose to not play by the same rules, and that has consequences, right? And if you call that your ethics or you call that authenticity for whatever reason, but every business and every industry has kind of rules, and some of them are written and some of them are unwritten. And so, to me, the combination of those two, and then why it makes extra sense is that I actually ultimately have a master's in innovation management. So I like that space of pushing the boundaries, technical innovation, frontier projects, new, different. And so chaos can be good and bad, right? Chaos is about expanding a lot of energy. And if it's unguided, it's the bad chaos. If you guide it, it's innovation and opportunity.
I love it. That is inspiring. So true. I think when people are interested in becoming a new startup in the beginning, their mind is a chaotic mess because they're not sure which way to go. And if you can harness the chaotic energy, you can build momentum out of it if you can focus yourself and create direction. That's what
Exactly.
I okay,
Yeah.
I was going to say that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
Harness the chaotic energy and build your momentum towards a goal.
Yeah. And people talk about, oh, being stuck or whatever. But when I come in with my clients, everybody's working 120 hours, right? Well, maybe not 120, but everybody's working and has been working really hard. And some of that work's been really good and meaningful. It's just that some of that effort is misguided or unguided, or it's at odds with each other, right? It's the energy is there and it's being expanded, and the intent is there and the willingness, that all is often there. But you could also see how if these things are working, start working a bit against each other or moving away from each other because there's not no clarity or no alignment, or there's nobody sees the pattern anymore, that's where the dysfunction comes from, right?
100%. Yes, everything has to make sense and somehow align, even as times change in the business and things have to evolve. So then you have to periodically reevaluate. And that's why it's good to call in a consultant like you if there's things that are too chaotic. So okay, let me see if I get this straight though. So you have a consulting business called the Chaos Games Consulting because your expertise is taking a business, whether it's 5 people business or 100 people business, and you can go in and analyze the situation and help them come up with a better game plan to be more successful in their business. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I typically work with five is maybe not quite the size. Then it's maybe more coaching. I do a lot of startup advisory work too. So then I wouldn't quite call it consulting. It's more coaching, right? Because the business is often then the one or two individuals in there. Because of my background and my experience, I'm used to working really complex collaborations. So the business doesn't necessarily have to be very big for me to be of use to them, but they can have very complex partnerships or a lot of risk involved or a lot of complex interfaces to manage simply because of how they're structured, right? And then you definitely want somebody like me. I would say if you're a really small business, there is probably cheaper solutions than me to help you through, or better. Yeah, there's different means, right? You probably want a business coach or something, but yeah, I come in these situations where people have typically already tried a few, like they tried to find the golden bullet, right? They're like, if we solve this, maybe everything else will fall in place too. But the challenge is if you're in chaos, it's because there's been like it's like plaque buildup in the artery, right? You're a doctor. Not you, I'm talking about the business ER. I like the medical metaphors. There's
Yes,
all these little things, the equivalent of if you are used to having a day a month where you just eat your way through a whole pack of cookies. If that's one day a month, you're probably fine. If you then suddenly find yourself you have a month where it happens actually 20 days out of 30, that's a problem, right? And businesses have all these little afflictions that by themselves they're fine, but some of them grow out of control, right? And then when you have too many of them out of control, then it doesn't necessarily take a major event to throw you out of whack, right? It can be kind of literally the last drop in the bucket that tips it over.
true. True. Now, as you've been expanding your consulting, you mentioned you moved back to New Orleans 3 years ago. Is that around the same time you started the consulting business?
No, the consulting business was there because it was just a vehicle for me to take on work.
Ah, yes, yes, you did say that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's why. But the podcast and the pivot to really having some specificity about it, about what my offering is and what I'm going after, came indeed as I moved back to New Orleans. When we moved back here, I was in a major, more typical contractual arrangement with a client, right? So I was on a 7-month deal with one specific client, traveling between continents, and working with them. So that took me through to the first Mardi Gras back here. And then I took a little break. And then, so it's been 2 years that I've really been saying, okay, I'm now based here. I also actually want to do work around here, and really made that pivot to saying, yeah, the heavy the majority of my business should be in this region, right? If this is where my life currently is and where my teenagers are trying to figure out life, then this is where I should be too.
I love it. All right. Well, so yes, we are both in New Orleans. Maybe next time we'll do a podcast where we sit in the same living room together and we put the camera up in front of us. I know our lives are so busy sometimes we're not in the same place, except when we're going to networking events. So I want to thank you, Marcia, so much. And tell me, I don't think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. How should people remember you? You're Marcia at the Business ER podcast of the Games Consulting, or
Yeah, if you go on LinkedIn and you just type in Maartje, Maartje, you find me. Um, If you type
okay,
in March and Chaos, if you type in March and the Business Emergency Room, any of these way, you'll find me. The podcast is on any and all platforms where you listen to podcasts. So,
excellent.
yes,
Well, thank you so much for being on with me today. I hope our listeners give you a follow, subscribe to your podcast and my podcast, and let's keep on innovating and growing because that's all we can do. And turn that chaos into momentous energy moving us forward.
exactly.
All right. Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you.